We're going to run through the start, pre-taxi, run up, and before checklist. First thing we'll do is make sure the door is closed and latched. We'll make sure it's shut, and then what you'll do, once it is shut, is you'll turn the latch counterclockwise until it clicks. Has a little bit of play. Seats and seatbelts will be set. Remember, the seats do not move up and down; they only move forward and aft. Make sure that's set properly, and then the seatbelt's just like a normal airline seatbelt with a clip. Fuel selector is down here in between the seats, main pointed inboards, so they point towards the tank. So inboards are mains, outboards or auxes. Induction air is filtered. That's right here in the center console. We don't really touch these. We pretty much just check them before flight, and then we leave them there all the way up. The next other positions, middle and down, are alternate and unfiltered ram air as appropriate. Cowl flaps are going to be open. They're electrically driven, so we have little switches here on the sub panel, almost all the way to the right. Make sure they're in the down position with the light on. Next, we got all circuit breakers. We got two rows of circuit breakers. One is on the pilot sub panel right here on the left side, and then there's another one that's kind of hidden on the right side underneath the right side sub panel. So you can just ask the examiner to check the circuit breakers on his side to verify that they're in fact all pushed in. No check batteries and alternators are already on. For the purpose of this demonstration, to be able to hear the audio, that is already on, so we turn the key clockwise till everything turns on. We would still have the avionics off. We have them on, obviously, to listen. Alternators are just switches. They just come up, one for each side. Beacon is on. We always keep that in the on position in case we forget to turn the battery off and leave the aircraft, so that way it's blinking. So we'll keep that to verify that is, in fact, in the on position. That is on the sub panel as well. And then we're going to hold the brakes. Note on the brakes, we do have a parking brake in this airplane. It is equipped with a parking brake, however we don't use it. It's not reliable, so it is located underneath the sub panel, so it is kind of hidden here underneath the left side pilot sub panel where it says park brake pull. Make sure that's all the way pushed in, and then you'll just leave it like that, and you'll hold the brakes using toe brakes. So now for the normal start, we'll go mixtures full rich, red levers all the way full forward. Then we'll do throttles full open and props are low pitch. So everything's full forward, all 6 levers are full forward, and then we'll turn the boost pumps on. Over to you. The boost pumps are all the way located to the right side of the pilot sub panel. It's a 3-position switch. Up is high, down, middle is off, and down is low. You can do each one individually, or you can do both at the same time. The fuel flow is on the EDM, the engine digital monitor, and it is down in the middle bottom portion of the screen. You may be able to see that in the screen, or you may not. You'll hear the fuel pumps working. They'll come up on the fuel flows on the engine digital monitor, just a couple seconds, and then back to the off position. Next, we'll do the throttle. What we'll do is you can bring both back, or you can bring just one back. Technique I like to use is bring one back. How the good gauge is to go and bring the throttle lever and kind of use the metal piece splitting the line just below throttle. And that's a good position to start with. Hopefully it gets you starting with around 1,000 RPMs. Once that's ready, we'll go ahead and clear the area. So clear left, center, or right. We'll start the left engine first. And as it starts, we're going inside to the RPMs right here. We've got it displayed 800 RPMs right now. We'll bring it up to about 1,000. That low voltage lights hopefully go out around 1,000 RPMs. And then you just pretty much set it. Every time you start the engine, after the start, we'll check that. After engine start, avionics on. So we'll go top to bottom on the far left side. Avionics on, EFD 1000, so the primary flight display, MFD 500. So 3 switches all up, and then we'll let that system come online. Once we've done that, we'll double check that the throttle is in fact at 1,000 RPMs, and we'll check to make sure oil pressure, volts, and vacuum is good. So oil pressure up here, top right corner of the engine digital monitor, it is in the green, about 50 psi. Volts right here, we only have 1 voltmeter for both systems, so it's about 28 volts, so that's good. And our low voltage light over here to the left is off as well. And then vacuum all the way over to the right is a vacuum gauge. The little nipple is removed, and the engine or the instrument itself is in the green. So the needle is in the green. Once that's done, we go into the same exact procedure for the right engine. We've already primed it, so we'll set the throttle to the same position as the other engine. Clear left, center, and right, and we'll go ahead and start the right. Once that's started up, same procedure after engine start, that we make sure everything's running properly. Set the RPM to about 1,000 RPMs. Make sure the oil pressure is good. Volts, remember it's one gauge for both systems, so you wouldn't be able to necessarily check it unless you cycle the alternators off independently. And then vacuum, obviously the nipple is removed and the needle doesn't move in its position, it remains in the green. Once we're done with that, RPMs are set, we'll go ahead and do our pre-taxi checklist. I have it here on the checklist on the iPad on the ForeFlight. We'll make sure right here it says on the PFD, it says to press either knob to accept. So we'll do 1 and then 2. Now they'll continue running their startup system checks. Mixtures lean as required. What we'll do here is with the 2 red levers, the mixtures will bring them back to right about this line just below the ridge on the throttle quadrant. Then we'll check the weather. So COM 1 will be used by the GTN 650, the touch screen, and then just below that is a standard KX 155 Navcom radio, and we'll check that. So 118.375, big knob moves the frequency left of the decimal, little knob moves them to the right of the decimal, and you have to pull the little knob out to get to the 0.25 increments. We'll switch that over to the U's, and then we'll come up to our audio panel and select COM 2 just to listen.
Zulu, wind calm, visibility 10, sky condition missing, temperature 23 Celsius, dew point 18 Celsius, altimeter 3005.
3005, how we'll do that on the PFD, bottom right corner it says barrel, we'll push that. And then with the right knob, it's in magenta now, the altimeter, which is in the middle of the screen, bottom right-hand corner of the attitude indicator portion. We can then cycle 3005 and double check to make sure that should be around 20 feet, which is field elevation. 3005, yep, that checks, and we'll double follow that up as well with our standby altimeter, so we always set it twice. Once we're done with that, we'll go and move on to our electric trim check. So we'll look down, there's no switch, so the electric trim is always working anytime the electric system is on. So we'll just look down at the elevator trim because the electric trim switch on the left yoke is only activating the elevator trim. We'll push the switch up and down to make sure the wheel is moving in the proper direction, and that's a good check. Once we are done with that, we'll move on to the autopilot test. All we're going to do here is the little push button just below the autopilot on switch. We'll push it and let go. All the lights come on, and then when you release it, they go out with the exception of the trim light that flashes 5 times, and that's a good test. Once we're done with that, we'll go over the GTN 650. We want to check the top line. Just the navigation is what we're concerned with. It's got to be a date that's in the future. That's good. We'll hit continue. Then we'll check to make sure the panel self-test is complete, and what that basically means that we want to check to see that the GTN 650 is talking to the Aspen, the EFD 1000, by looking at the indications. So it says LCDI, so the course line is half left, the glide slope is half up, and the course line is 150. That looks good, so we'll go ahead and continue, and now we're set. That's done with the pre-taxi, and then we can go ahead and make the call on the CTAF frequency of 122.725. Make sure we're on the proper frequency, make the call, and we'll taxi up to the run-up. Well, we'll go ahead and move on as if we're in the run-up. So first thing we'll do is we'll check the flight controls. So we'll do a 4 corners. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then back to neutral. Fuel boost pumps are off. We always check to make sure the temperature. If the temperature was above 90 degrees, we can set them to low. Then we'll make sure the mixtures are coming back full rich. Then we'll bring the throttles up to 2200. This is important where we make sure we're holding the brakes, not using the parking brake. We're using the RPMs because on deck the governors aren't being used yet until we get the RPMs within a governing range. But once we've got them in a governing range, remember the digital instrument gets you pretty specific RPMs. Don't worry about fine-tuning that. Get it within about 100 RPMs, and then you're good. First thing we're going to check is the governor check. So we'll make sure the RPMs drop when I pull the lever back no further down than the feather detent. There's the drop and right back up. Same thing with the other one. Smooth, making sure drop in RPM, slight rise in RPM and manifold pressure.
Emirates traffic, Citizen 754, clear, runway 28, Emirates traffic.
Everything good, 754?
Fantastic.
Next thing, we'll go ahead and bring our RPMs back to 1700 and do the magneto check. Magnetos are on the far left side. They're vertically oriented, so you just make sure there's a label. The top one's the left engine, the bottom one's the right. We'll do a number of clicks. So we'll start with 1 click. Watch those RPMs drop. Back 1 click as well to both positions, and we'll do 2 clicks counterclockwise. 1, 2, RPMs drop, back to both. Same thing with the right engine. 1 click back, 2 clicks, 2 clicks, 2 clicks back. Next, we'll go ahead and bring the throttles back to 1500 RPMs. This will do the feather check. We're not really looking at engine indications for this one. This is a look and listen type of check. We're going to be bringing the prop lever all the way back to the feather detent and pass it into the feather position, and then we're going to be looking for any oil coming out of the prop dome area, as well as listening for the prop pitch change. There it is, right back up to high RPM or low pitch as soon as you hear it. That's it, and that's all we have to do for the feather check. And the last thing we'll do before we bring the power back to 1000 RPMs is to make sure our volts good in the green, and while our vacuum is still in the green as well. Then we're bringing throttles back to 1000, and we are complete with the run-up. Finally, we'll do the before takeoff checklist. We'll make sure that doors and windows are shut and locked. Seatbelts are still good. Fuel selectors are still in the main position. Trim is set, so we'll check all 3 positions because we have elevator, aileron, and rudder trim. So elevator, 6 up, aileron should be neutral in the 0 position, and rudder. Each one of the indicators is pretty much co-located with each one of the wheels, and what you may have to do is, as you can see, pull the yoke back to be able to visually check the positions of the trim. Next, we'll make sure the flaps are up, so flap position is in the up. The indicator's reading up, and we'll also visually check that is in the up position. GTN 650, this is where we'll set the flight plan. So we'll set this up by going to the flight plan. It already defaults to our current location, which is Hampton Roads. Then we'll set up for the Victor 139 by typing in the first part, or the first fix, which is the Norfolk Vortac. And then we'll load the airway by selecting the Vortac, going load airway, Victor 139, and then we'll select our exit waypoint, which happens to be Suns. And then we're done by hitting load, and it loads it in the flight plan. Finally, we will activate that leg by selecting the waypoint, select active leg, and OK. And then you'll be able to visually verify that as well on the Mfd 500 and the HSI and the EFD 1000. Once we are done with the GTN 650 and the flight plan, we'll go ahead and go back to the default nav page by depressing and holding the home button, and it goes back to the default nav. Instrument approach, if we had one, we would load that. We'll go ahead and leave that for now. CDI source on the GTN 650, it's right here in the very bottom middle. It's in magenta if it's GPS, or green if it's in VLOC, which stands for VOR Localizer, and it's a one-way system. So if we wanted to switch it, we toggle this button in the bottom left corner labeled CDI. As you can see, it's changing from VLOC or GPS to VLOC back to GPS. We also have that capability on the EFD 1000. However, that does not change the source with the GTN 650, so we don't use that. So we verified that's in GPS position. Mfd Range Scale, we're at 15 miles. 15 miles is good for what we're going to be doing during your training. Ifr Clearance, this is where you pick up your scenario talking about or basically simulating that you are calling Norfolk Approach. You receive your clearance and write that down, and then we'll go from there. So for instance, we want to verify that our course is in fact selected 220 for the Victor 139. It's okay if that does not match exactly with the approach, or so the IFR en route chart. As long as it's within 1 degree, you're fine. Next thing, we'll make sure the heading bug is where we want, either on runway heading or to a initial turn per your departure instructions. So for instance, your departure instructions were turned to 180 on departure after the Hampton Roads departure procedures. We'll just use the heading bug. You're using the right knob to twist in the heading bug. You've got a digital display in the top right corner of it that gives you the actual number of heading and degrees of the heading bug. We've done that, then we'll set, next one will be the altitude bug. We'll depress and release that same knob. The magenta will then change up to the altitude bug in the top right corner, and we'll set 2,000 feet or whatever you're assigned, and then that is set. Next, we'll set the airspeed bug. We'll just verify that top left corner. If we wanted to update it to something different than 120, which is what we want it as, we would depress and release the left knob until that data field becomes magenta, and then we can adjust it as required. Last thing we'll do is we'll check the transponder over here to altitude encoding. It is in fact altitude encoding. I just switched over to VFR from a previous code by selecting the VFR button. If I wanted to go back to the previous code that I had on there, I hit VFR again, but we'll keep it on VFR for now, or plug it in as assigned. Strobe and taxi lights are on. Strobe light is on your subpanel, pilot subpanel, all the way to the right. You turn that to the on position, so really all you have is strobe light, beacon, and then you can turn your landing lights on, which are just to the left side of the cow flap light. Bring those on as well. That's at the discretion of your instructor or the examiner. Next thing we'll do is the takeoff brief. That's one page over on your checklist in the iPad. We'll talk about the runway, so it's 5,350 feet by 100. The wind direction, we'll talk about the takeoff, the abort procedure, the accelerate stop distance that you should have calculated with your performance card, your abort criteria, and then cover any questions at that point. Then you're complete with the takeoff checklist. That is complete. And then finally we'll move our for-flight from documents to maps, so that we already got that, so we have that up as another moving map display, and then we are ready to go. That pretty much is it. At that point we take the runway and take off. So you've now gone through the start, pre-taxi, and run-up and before takeoff checklist.